We've got time for a couple of questions, and I'm really looking for questions, not comments or your thoughts. There'll be plenty of time for that. But if you've got questions of any of the speakers about what it is that they said, what did they mean by what they said, I'm happy to take them from the study group. Anybody? Hans?
Quick question for John. Sorry, or for anyone really, regarding
John,
the children's
George,
school
Lisa,
and
why don't
West.
you all come up?
The children's school and Westover Library, are those? Is that a shared use facility? Is that county? Is that APS? The Reed School.
APS owns the building, I believe. We have a memorandum of understanding around the library. There's a small piece of the property that is owned by.
Yeah.
So is that considered an APS facility or a county facility or?
It's a school facility.
Okay.
With a library in it.
Think of yourself as a rock star and put the mic closer to your mouth.
It helps when you turn it on.
Toby and then Jackie.
So, two questions. The first is, George, you mentioned the 2.2 miles or square miles of county land. How has that increased or decreased over time? Is the first question.
Yeah, George, why don't you do it from up here?
And now I'll ask my second question, which probably goes to all three speakers, and that is, what's the strategy for identifying potential opportunities for acquisition?
Yeah, we're going to get into that a lot in
okay,
the second half of the program.
Okay, Toby, I don't really know the answer to the first question. We have bought, particularly in the park side, we have increased land, but on the county facility side, the last one I can think of is we bought a warehouse on South Eads, probably about a 15,000 square foot lot.
Do we know anything about schools? Because the other thing I would be interested in has there been a shift back and forth between schools and county, the proportion between that 2.2?
So there were a number of school. That's not me, by the way. There were a number of school facilities that were surplused that went to the county in the 70s, 80s, and I think early 90s that are now, so Fairlington is one of those. Yeah, there's a few of those, but other than that, we haven't released any land.
Jackie?
I think it was also George that talked about the numbers of acres of privately owned, zoned industrial space. And so my question is, do we have an idea of what the range is of the cost of industrially zoned acreage?
I think the honest answer is no, we don't.
We'll get back to you on that, Jackie. I don't think anybody here.
We had an offer several years ago to buy a small lot for what seemed to be a very high price at the time, and we were unable to close the deal.
It's fairly easy to gather that information. We can
of course, across the different uses, industrial is one. We probably want to know how it compares.
Yeah, in the back. Right now, I'm limiting questions to members of the study group.
Hi, I'm Carolina from the NOC community, and I have two questions. I think it's for George also. First question is, you mentioned something about us not being compliant with a 9/11 commitment or something or other around emergency management. Can you clarify what that was, please?
Yes, well, I wasn't working here when 9/11 occurred, but there was an after-action task force and said that the county was severely constrained by the small size of our emergency operations center, which is on the first floor of the Court Square West building in the courthouse complex, and it's a very cramped facility. When you look at, you benchmark against other folks, they have a lot more space so that they can bring in more of their senior management to respond and control our response to events.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, but I have one more question. You also mentioned that the cost benefit of, investing in our own facilities for not even just storage, but I think it was around the ART buses and the bus maintenance and things like that was significantly, well, the process of investing in our own facility would be significantly cheaper than paying WMATA. Can you all provide us with some actual numbers around
We'll have to get you the actual
Sure.
numbers of the premium we pay to WMATA
Yeah.
to fuel and wash our buses. And recall that they only accommodate us on a space available basis after 2 o'clock in the morning. So that's a staffing cost we also incur.
Right, right. Just trying to get an understanding of what the actual
We'll
benefit
come
is.
up with some actual
Great.
numbers for you,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Lynn?
I have a question regarding the parks. For the outdoor active facilities, does that include time spent without it being a sport, just having an outdoor active? Because everything I heard you talk about was related to sports activities.
Yeah, those percentages were just the program needs. When they're not reserved, they're open for drop-in play, most of the facilities. So we don't have any great way to capture that because people haven't had to reserve them through our system. So that would be more through observation, but they're not included in the percentages.
Kelly?
About that too. The outdoor active facilities and sports fields. Can you, the inventory of them, does it include the entire inventory or those usable right now? I know some of the APS ones are not usable because of relocatables or whatnot. So I'm just trying to understand whether that's the total inventory or the usable ones at this point.
It's everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see the usable numbers versus that.
Okay, we can get those for you.
Jason?
Mike, this is Jason Rylander. My question is actually kind of similar in that I'm wondering if we're keeping adequate track of the actual amount of green space. One of the things we learned during the debate over the potential new school building at Thomas Jefferson site is that the county sometimes considers parkland to be, everything at the park, including the parking lots and such. And when we see facilities being built on school lands, some of which are also green space, that's a loss of green space. The trailers that Kelly mentioned is a temporary loss of green space. Are we able to separate out that so we know what's impervious, what's not impervious, what's usable for what type of thing?
I think as we go through, John may have some thoughts on the school stuff, but I think as we go through that for the public space master plan, we'll be looking at that. We've never segregated in the past and carved out all the little different spaces within a park, but I think we need to understand what the coverage is.
Jason, I think the short answer to that is for the purposes of this study, we're not going to have it because it's going to take them much longer to put that together, and that'll really get folded into the public space master plan. Kathleen?
Hi, I was wondering, in terms of the community facilities and public health in general, is it possible that we might need some additional police locations and also health facilities? And is that something we're going to look at as well, or have somebody speak to us as well about?
It's not something that we've identified specifically because it wasn't enumerated in the charge, but as the facilities committee gets into that, particularly on the health side, it wasn't enumerated. But as the subcommittee gets into it, I expect we're going to at least raise those questions and say it's something that needs to be looked at. Public safety, yes. Health, maybe less so. Other questions from the study group? I've got a couple of introductions I want to make just of elected officials who are good enough to join us tonight. We've got two members of the school board, Emma Villan Sanchez and Nancy Van Doren, who is spending her birthday night with us. And rather than serve cake, what she brought was a lot of fruit. So people are invited to help themselves in celebration of her birthday by taking a piece of fruit during the break. We also have the chairman of the county board, Mary Hines. and a member of the County Board, Libby Garvey, and State Senator Barbara Favola. And with that, and the attention you've given this, you are entitled to a 5-minute break. So everybody stretch, walk around a little bit. We got a very important panel discussion to follow and more opportunity for questions.